Okay, so, I think a lot of people are probably curious about this, but maybe they haven't really had a chance to, learn about it or talk about it openly. We're talking about anal pleasure and sex. And it's kind of wild when you think about the numbers.
Yeah, right.
Like Kinsey, he suggested that the anal region had some erotic significance for half of people.
Wow.
And then there's this Playboy survey that said almost half of men and more than half of women had tried anal intercourse at least once.
It is fascinating how, there's so much potential for pleasure and intimacy in this area, but it's still kind of hush-hush for a lot of people. It's like this weird gap between what people are curious about in private and what they're willing to talk about.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So that's exactly what we're diving into today, right? Trying to shed some light on this whole thing. We're going to be looking at Dr. Jack Morin's work, especially his 10 Rules of Anal Sex from his book, Anal Pleasure and Health. This is your chance to really get informed, cut through all the BS, and figure out what's actually true.
Yeah, I think this is for anyone who's ever been curious about this, whether it's something you're into personally or you just want to understand it better, it affects a lot of people's lives.
Totally. We're going to cover it all. Different ways to stimulate the anus, the potential for pleasure, and all the important stuff like safety and even the psychological factors.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's jump right into it. Rule number one is that anal intercourse is actually the least common form of anal sex.
That's interesting, right? You hear anal sex, and most people automatically jump to intercourse.
Yeah, it's the only thing.
But Dr. Morin is saying, hold on, there's so much more to anal eroticism than just that.
Exactly. There are tons of other ways to experience pleasure through the anus. You could just touch the area during masturbation or when you're intimate with a partner during regular intercourse or oral sex.
And it doesn't have to be a quick touch.
Right.
We're talking about actually inserting a finger, either exploring yourself or with a partner.
Right, and you can move it around gently, rotate it, and so on. And of course, you have sex toys, dildos, vibrators, all designed for deeper exploration.
What's really interesting is that Dr. Morin found that a lot of men, even straight men, prefer deeper penetration.
That does kind of challenge some assumptions.
Definitely.
And then there's rimming, or oral anal sex. Dr. Morin says people have all sorts of reactions to this one. Some are completely disgusted by it, while others find it incredibly pleasurable.
That's right.
So rule number one kind of reframes the whole thing for us. Anal sex is more than just one act. It's this whole range of possibilities.
Yeah, it's not so cut and dried. You have a whole spectrum of experiences and preferences to consider.
All right, let's move on to rule number two. Anal stimulation, even intercourse, doesn't have to be painful if you do it right. I think this is so important because there's this huge misconception that it's always going to hurt.
Yeah, that idea is so ingrained. It's like a default for so many people. And Dr. Morin says that can be really misleading.
Oh, for sure.
Pain is your body's way of telling you something's wrong. Like any other part of your body, if it hurts, you need to pay attention. The anus is sensitive, but it's not supposed to hurt during sex if you approach it correctly.
So he talks about this initial muscle response when you first put something in the anus, the muscles naturally tighten up.
It's a spasm, kind of a reflex. And the key, Dr. Morin says, is to wait for those muscles to relax.
Definitely not about forcing your way in.
Exactly. Dr. Morin makes a clear distinction between that initial spasm and actually damaging the tissues. If you force it when there's resistance, that's when you can cause real pain and injury. And any pleasure you might feel then, it's not real pleasure, it's just the relief of not feeling that sharp pain anymore.
So it's super important for the passive partner to be truly ready. It's not just about physically relaxing, although that helps a lot.
Oh, taking your time, touching, exploring, all that helps.
But it's also about really wanting it, being mentally and emotionally open to the experience.
That's huge. Desire has to be there, both in your mind and your body. And the stimulation, it always needs to match your level of comfort. It should be a collaborative thing.
Makes total sense. So what if you've had some bad experiences in the past? Does that mean it's always going to be uncomfortable?
That brings us to rule number 3. Dr. Morin says, no, you can still enjoy anal sex, even if it's been uncomfortable before.
Okay, that's good to hear.
A lot of the time, this chronic anal tension is the culprit, that baseline tightness. And sometimes it's connected to things like hemorrhoids or constipation.
So how do you break that cycle of tension and discomfort?
Well, Dr. Morin suggests getting more familiar with the area, touching it regularly, maybe in the shower, just to get comfortable with it, reduce that anxiety.
That makes sense. Just kind of desensitizing yourself to it.
Right. And deep breathing exercises can help too. You'd be surprised how much that can relax those muscles. He also suggests experimenting with anal stimulation during masturbation. But here's the key. If anything feels uncomfortable, stop right away. It's about learning what your body is telling you without the pressure of a partner.
So you're in control the whole time?
Exactly. And he talks about this turning point for a lot of people when they focus on anal massage without the goal of intercourse. This lets the person receiving just focus on the sensations, explore the potential for pleasure without worrying about penetration.
That sounds really smart. Just taking the pressure off and focusing on the sensations.
It can really help retrain your body and your mind.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty anatomy for a bit with rule number 4. It's about those two muscle rings around the anal opening called sphincters and how they each work differently.
Yeah, visualizing this can be really helpful.
Totally. So, if you were to gently insert a finger a little way in, like Dr. Morin suggests, you might actually feel those two rings.
They're really close together, less than a quarter of an inch apart.
And he explains how they function, which is super interesting. So, the external sphincter is voluntary. It means you can control it consciously, like the muscles in your hand. You can clench it, release it whenever you want.
But the internal sphincter is a different story. It works involuntarily. It's controlled by your autonomic nervous system.
The same one that regulates your heartbeat and stuff, right? You don't have to think about it.
Exactly. So if you're feeling anxious or unsafe, even if you're trying to relax consciously, that internal sphincter might just clamp down on its own. That's why feeling safe and comfortable is so crucial.
Yeah, it's all connected. It's not just about willpower. So even when you are comfortable, Dr. Morin says that you can actually learn to influence your internal sphincter a bit. And that can actually enhance pleasure.
It's not about forcing it to relax. It's more about bringing awareness to it. Regularly exploring it with a finger, maybe every day, just paying attention to the sensations. Over time, you can gain more control.
Wow, so it's like training a muscle you didn't even know you could control.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about the good stuff. Rule number 5. Anal stimulation can provide all sorts of pleasure. It's not just one single sensation.
There's a lot to unpack there. Dr. Morin points out that there's a huge concentration of nerve endings right around the anal opening.
So that explains why even just touching that area can feel really good.
Exactly. But then when you go deeper into the rectum, the sensations change. The outer part of the rectum, it has some nerve endings similar to the vagina.
Interesting. So there's some shared sensitivity there.
Yeah. But as you go further in, it's more about pressure sensitivity. That's where it gets really interesting because some people start to enjoy that feeling of fullness and pressure, especially when they can separate it in their minds from needing to go to the bathroom.
And he ties that into the practice of fisting, which, as he describes it, involves inserting multiple fingers or even a whole hand and forearm.
It all makes sense when you think about how pressure sensitivity plays a role there.
Right. Now, for men listening, there's also the prostate gland.
Oh yeah, a classic.
Yeah. It's right beyond the rectal wall, and it can be a real pleasure point for a lot of guys when it's massaged.
And then there's the penile bulb at the base of the penis, which gets stimulated indirectly during a lot of anal sex activities.
So there's this whole range of physical sensations possible. But Dr. Morin also talks about the psychological aspects, which I think are often overlooked.
Yeah, and they can be really powerful. For some people, the fact that anal sex is taboo in so many cultures, that actually makes it more exciting. It's that whole forbidden fruit thing.
Right, like it's naughty and exciting.
And then there's the whole dirty aspect, that raunchy kind of excitement.
Yeah, he even says that people who are into rimming might enjoy feeling disgustingly and delightfully perverse. It's all about what turns you on.
Totally. What you find personally exciting and pleasurable.
For other people, though, the anus is seen as this very intimate, special place. And sharing that with a partner, it's an act of deep openness and giving.
So the psychological side of things is just as diverse and unique as the physical sensations.
It's fascinating. Now, the big question, can you actually orgasm from all this? Rule number 6 is all about that, anal stimulation and orgasm.
It is a big one. Dr. Morin says that only a smaller percentage of people can orgasm through anal stimulation alone. For women, it might happen through pelvic muscle contractions or just the intensity of being penetrated.
And for men, the prostate seems to be a key factor, plus that indirect stimulation of the penile bulb we talk about.
Exactly. He emphasizes that when people do orgasm from anal stimulation alone, it's often when they're totally absorbed in the sensations and their fantasies. Interestingly, he says that trying too hard to make it happen can actually work against you, can create tension and get in the way of the pleasure.
So it's like just let go and enjoy the sensations rather than focusing on the goal. He also clarifies that while most people need direct genital stimulation to orgasm, there are some who can only climax through anal stimulation.
Which is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It is. Okay, let's move on to something that might surprise you. Rule number 7. What you eat actually affects your enjoyment of anal sex.
I know, it sounds kind of out there.
Right, but it makes total sense when you remember the main job of the anus and rectum, getting rid of waste. Dr. Morin talks about how important it is to eat enough fiber. That helps make your poop softer and bulkier and easier to pass.
So you're not straining and irritating the anal tissues, which can lead to discomfort and tension.
Exactly. So eating lots of fruits, veggies, whole grains, and unprocessed bran, that's key for good anal health. And that, in turn, can make anal sex more comfortable and enjoyable.
It's all about creating the right internal environment for pleasure.
Now, when it comes to hygiene, are the rules the same for the vagina and the rectum?
That's rule number 8, and Dr. Morin says, nope, there are some big differences.
Okay, good to know.
While both are lined with soft tissue and can expand, the vagina and rectum are pretty different anatomically. The rectum has an S shape, and it doesn't naturally lubricate itself like the vagina does.
That's why he's adamant about using lubricant for any kind of anal penetration.
Absolutely essential.
And he suggests water-based lubes, especially if you're using condoms, and avoiding those with chemical additives.
Good advice. And then there's the fact that the rectum's job is to hold poop. Even if you go right before, some might still be there, especially if your stool isn't well formed. So that brings up the practice of anal douching.
Which some people do to feel cleaner and more relaxed. But for others, the dirtiness is actually part of the erotic appeal.
Right. It can be a turn-on for some.
So it really depends on your personal preferences, what makes you feel good.
It all comes down to that. And it's important to respect both perspectives.
Totally. Okay, rule number 9 tackles the power dynamics that often come with anal sex. The rule is that anal intercourse is not always about dominance and submission.
Yeah, there's this whole top and bottom imagery that's really common. Dr. Morin thinks the idea that anal sex is inherently painful might contribute to this, like one person is taking something from the other. He acknowledges that for some people, these power fantasies can be really hot.
Yeah, no judgment there.
But he also warns that actual pain, as opposed to the fantasy of submission, can be a real problem.
For sure.
And for a lot of people, that top-bottom imagery can actually make it hard to enjoy anal sex.
Makes sense.
The idea of giving up control or being humiliated, it can trigger those anal muscles to tense up. Dr. Morin suggests reframing anal sex as something pleasurable for both partners, not a power struggle. That can help people relax and enjoy it more.
Shifting the focus from power to pleasure, I love that. Okay, finally, rule number 10. Anal sex can be perfectly safe, even beneficial. This is good news for a lot of people, especially given all the anxiety surrounding it.
It is reassuring. Dr. Morin addresses this belief that a lot of people have, even some doctors, that anal sex is inherently dangerous. He says that you can pretty much avoid physical injury if you follow those basic principles. Respect pain, don't use force, and stay away from drugs and alcohol that could cloud your judgment.
And then there's the risk of STIs. He points out that things like gonorrhea, syphilis, and herpes can affect the anal area. And there's the potential for intestinal issues from fecal-oral contact during rimming.
And of course, there's HIV transmission.
Right. He explains that the virus can spread through tiny tears in the rectal tissue during anal intercourse. So he really stresses the importance of practicing safer sex.
Always.
That means using condoms correctly and consistently for anal intercourse and using barriers for rimming. He does say that the risk is much lower in monogamous relationships where both partners know their status.
That's true. But protection is still a good idea in general.
Absolutely. And one last thing he highlights is that challenging negative attitudes toward anal health has actually helped a lot of people who have chronic anal medical problems. He says a positive and informed mindset is key to fully enjoying the erotic potential of the anus.
I love that takeaway. It's so important.
So, to sum it all up, anal pleasure is real, it's diverse, and it can be explored safely when you have knowledge and communication. The key is to ditch the myths, prioritize your comfort, and always get consent.
It's about getting past the taboos and embracing a more informed and nuanced understanding of this part of sexuality.
This has been a super informative deep dive, and I hope it's been helpful for you too. Now that you've learned about the anatomy, the different sensations, and the psychology involved, think about this. How might this knowledge change your view on intimacy and pleasure, both for yourself and when you talk to partners? It makes you think about the taboos we have and how valuable it is to explore all forms of sexual expression openly and honestly.
It's a journey, for sure.
This is just the beginning of the conversation. There are tons of resources out there, and we encourage you to seek them out. Talk to people you trust, keep learning and exploring.
That's the best way to go.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See you then.